Gary, is your audio working okay? Haven't heard from you yet.
You tell me.
Sounds great.
Okay.
We can't see anything on the City Hall camera, though. Is that expected? Or we can't see any of you guys?
That video's good.
All good.
You know what we look like.
This is Gian, or not Gian. You're gonna be Gianna.
All right, we are now live on YouTube.
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay, end meeting, that would be.
Okay. Are we all ready to go there in City Hall?
We're ready. It's all yours.
Okay, thank you. We'll see how this goes, chairing the meeting via Zoom with people in person. So if I'm missing what's going on there, just speak up. I'd like to call to order the City of Philomath Planning Commission meeting. Could we start with a roll call?
Gianna Bernardini. Here. Haley Green.
Here.
Dan Hunsaker.
Here.
Darlene Rose. Here. Joseph Sullivan.
Here.
Peggy Yoder. Here. City Council Liaison Ruth Causey. Here.
And Gary Connor here.
You're at the top of the list.
All right. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from May 3rd. Does anyone have any comments on those draft minutes in the packet?
I have one comment or one potential correction. Somehow the minutes, I think they're on the desk over there, so I don't want to get up and get them. The minutes list, once we started the business of the meeting and we had kind of the main motion to pass, and then we had a bunch of motions to amend. The first motion to amend said it was a motion to amend. The second motion to amend, I think, just omitted the words "to amend." Let me find my minutes and it's mine.
Oh, yeah. Action 2, line 19.
Action 2. So what you're on page 2, line 19, you would add motion to amend or to amend action number 1.
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I do have one.
Yes, Van.
On page 3, line 13, action 6. I motioned there was to amend line 52, which was the header, to include industrial land supply and infrastructure, not the statement within the sentence below in 56.
So we should read line 55.
Well, it was 52
52. Okay.
that the header was on. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't have it.
You don't have it in front of you.
Verify.
Okay.
The-
Well, I looked back and it was line 52.
So just replace line 56 with line 52.
Okay.
Well, except for leaving out "to accommodate." That was just part of the sentence below it.
Okay, so strike "to accommodate."
It's right. In that instance, yeah.
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Yoder.
On page 2, on action 3, which is line 26, I listened again to I watched our video, and I actually voted no on that. It says I voted yes.
On action number 3.
Yes.
So on line 42, you should be under no, and it should be a 6-1.
Yes. And also on, I had a question on one of them, on page 3, line 6, actually line 7, developers to develop infrastructure funding. The closed captions don't work very well for me. I try and find things under closed captions and the conversations are really comical. We've talked about frogs. I mean, we talk about things that just aren't there. So I couldn't find what that meant. Does anybody remember developers to develop infrastructure funding?
That was, oh, this is, again, I'll be happy to go back and look at that.
Okay. And then I have a question on page 5. Between 7 and 17, workforce development, the school district, and it's been approved by Andrade and Bisco and Kazi and Lehman, and they weren't in this meeting.
Right, yeah, I caught that one too.
I didn't even see that.
I was
So-
like, oh, maybe city council has to approve
No.
our minutes? I was
have
like,
a-
oh my God, what a
That's a
drag.
giveaway that I have an autocorrect on my
You're
Word
voting.
document. And when I type 7-0, it automatically fills all of the
Oh,
minutes. So I have
okay.
to change them in planning commission. So.
Yeah,
I will-
nice.
Let me make these corrections to these minutes and let's bring them back at the next meeting, if I may.
That works for me. Were there any other comments? Gianna, you had your hand up for a while.
Just a quick, on page 1, line 32-ish to 36. I feel like the words get a little bit jumbled up, where it says, or how much the total is to actually do it is you need to give our city government.
Yeah.
I was thinking that is could maybe go. I think the way it would read best is to say, or how much the total is to actually do it, period.
The problem with that is that was actually a motion made by Commissioner Sullivan. And so I was working with what he stated there. So we don't get to massage his words after the fact.
Okay.
If
So,
you look at the action though, that's.
Commissioner
Okay.
Connor, you could take a motion to table these minutes until the
That's fine.
next meeting.
Yes, I would take that motion.
So moved.
For a second,
Second.
all in favor? Raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Did you catch all those yeses?
Yes.
That brings us to the second item on our agenda, which is the public hearing for the comprehensive plan, chapter 3, housing policies. And we'll just jump right into that. Do we have anyone in attendance there in the?
Yes, we do. We have Selena Barnes from the Willamette Association of Realtors has signed up to speak.
Okay. Okay. And then anyone online?
No.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome. Start off by reviewing well, it says I'm supposed to review the case title and the summary provided by staff. I think the title is just the comprehensive plan, chapter 3, housing policies. The summary provided by staff consists of reiteration of the current housing policies that are in the existing comprehensive plan. And we are tasked with updating that in accordance with Oregon state law and guidelines. And I don't know, Mr. Workman, if there's anything more we need to say about the staff summary?
I think that's sufficient.
And I would say that what I would say there is that the summary, the formal summary goes through and is a check of the draft chapter that we've put together versus the requirements from the state, with the conclusion that it does meet the criteria set by the Philomath Municipal Code and Oregon State Statute. So our proceeding for the public hearing tonight will start with a staff report, and then public testimony. And then the Planning Commission can ask questions of staff and then deliberate and make final recommendations. Persons testifying either orally or in writing may request a continuance or request the record to be held open. These requests should be included in your testimony. And we will keep track of requests for continuances or keeping the record open. The public hearing is now open. Do any commissioners wish to declare any potential or actual conflicts of interest? Does anyone wish to rebut that lack of disclosure? Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds, meaning the Planning Commission is not the appropriate body for this hearing? So land use decisions such as this case under consideration this evening are evaluated against applicable statewide planning goals and guidelines and criteria from the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan as presented in the staff report. We will now proceed to the staff report. Mr. Workman.
Great, thank you. Excuse me. Staff report was provided in your packet. I'll just go through, we've already hit on the background and the summary of the process and why we're going through what we're going through. I'm just going to summarize the findings and we'll move through the process. I'm happy to answer questions later in this meeting. The first finding is just, again, note that we didn't hold an official pre-application meeting or receive an application because the city's the applicant, the city's going through this process. Excuse me, I have a tickle in my throat that's bothering me. We did, however, give proper notice both to the press and to the public. DLCD also receives notice of the proceedings and the changes that we're wanting to make. On page 2 of 3, the second finding, again, the city did provide notice to DLCD April 7th. And the second finding there, that the proposed housing policies for Philomath Comprehensive Plan comply with the state planning goals required for housing. The amendments to Chapter 3 of the Comprehensive Plan are provided in Exhibit A to the staff report. That's what the bulk of what the Planning Commission was working on. Didn't go through each of those one by one, but if you'll recall at our first meeting of the Planning Commission, when we looked at these policies, we looked at those state requirements, read through all those, and we've been watching to make sure that we're compliant there, and we are. For number 2, receiving comments, we have not received any comments from DLCD back on the notice that we gave them, and not overly surprising. They stay pretty busy and didn't receive comments back from them. For number 3, in our governmental agreements, nothing applicable there. For number 4, fourth criteria, any applicable comprehensive plan policies, provisions of the code that are implemented in the plan. We looked at just the first one, which was citizen involvement. And again, going back to the notices we gave to the public, notification to the press, making this land or this change to the comprehensive plan available to the public so the public can be involved in the planning process. And we've done that with the outreach that's been provided. The first meeting that the public was specifically invited to on the hearing is tonight's meeting, but they were also invited to previous meetings of the Planning Commission when this topic was discussed. And going forward as the process following tonight's hearing, there'll be another hearing at the city council level where the public will also be invited and have the opportunity to give testimony and participate in this process. Excuse me. Plan amendments and update policies. These are within the conference plan itself. It tells us how we're to be updating the plan. It's to be done periodically, reviewing the text, and then hold the public hearings to go through that process. This is essentially like a type 4 land use where it's legislative, where it's not affecting any one individual property. It's affecting everybody in the city equally. So there's kind of broad notice to everybody, and there's not just one party that's affected. So the last finding is the city is following our public hearing process, including first reviewing this at the planning commission level and then later on to the city council. So in conclusion, proposed amendments to chapter 3 housing of the Philomath Conference Plan meet the criteria set by the Philomath Municipal Code, Oregon State Statute, and the comprehensive plan itself. That concludes my staff report.
Okay, thank you. Are there any preliminary questions from the Planning Commission commissioners to the staff at this point? We'll have the opportunity to ask additional questions after the public testimony. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the public testimony. Please let us know your name and if you're a resident of Philomath or not. And
Commissioner Connors, Selena Barnes has signed up to speak in favor.
okay, please let's hear from Selena.
Come on, join us at the table.
Thank
We
you.
can make sure we pick you up on the.
Oh, that's why
Microphone.
nobody can sit in that seat.
I'm the troublemaker.
It's a popular seat.
Thank you very much. Chair Connor and commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to speak to you tonight. I represent the Willamette Association of Realtors. I am not a resident of Philomath, but our association covers both Lynn and Benton counties, and I'm the Government Affairs Director for the association. And with that, we are in favor of this, what you have prepared as the draft for the chapter on housing. We had submitted some comments on Friday. I apologize, they weren't submitted earlier so they could be included in your packet. But our only comments and our request would be is that in policy 2.1, there has some requirement language there. And our feeling was that perhaps this might not be the best place for that as in the comprehensive plan, that it didn't seem to fit with the same tone as what you had otherwise, and that perhaps that would be better addressed since some of those were action items, perhaps in a development code or strategic plan. So I will again be very brief, as were our comments, but I wanted to take this opportunity to drive down and I'm kind of new to this role, having been in it a year, so I actually want to get out and meet people as well. So thank you for your time tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Yes, thank you very much. Are there any questions for the speaker?
Where
I'll start.
exactly is the require in 2 point?
Page
In
2.
2.1
Oh, okay,
31.
line 31.
Where?
and the very end,
Page 2, line 31.
it says by requiring the following elements. And so that's what we were concerned with, is where it was saying requiring those elements.
Oh. I
So-
couldn't find to do that.
So,
Okay.
so I would like to ask a question. If that wording was revised from by requiring, so delete the words by and requiring and insert the word including, and then get rid of all the verbs, just so that all of these elements are things to be considered when developing the standards and objectives. Is there still an objection when it gets rid of the word require and just makes this a list of things to be considered?
Absolutely, we would have no objection to that. We were just concerned with the actual requirement. portion.
Thank you.
So I just got this today when I walked in.
I realize.
So, had I gotten it earlier, I probably would have done a search on the word require and to see if it's elsewhere in the document. Because right now I don't know if it's elsewhere in the document. If it is it just regarding goal 2 and policy 2 that you're concerned will require, if the word require, if it was somewhere else?
I did a search of the document prior to drafting that submission, and I did not find the word require
okay.
in the chapter otherwise,
Oh, okay. That answers that
or a
question.
similar one.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you.
You did it for me. So Gary, you're saying environmental protection and sustainability by removing requiring, but replacing it with, what was it again?
Well, I think we should delay any discussion about revisions to our deliberation time. We should probably just ask questions of the speaker at this point.
Agreed.
Can I ask how you came to read this document?
Sure. I follow what's going on. I actually work for 3 associations, and so I follow what's going on in the various cities within those jurisdictions, and actually get notices as well if there's any public hearings going on. I have watched some of your planning commission meetings as well while you've been working on this document, and so that's where I came up with it. It's my job to follow what the different cities are doing in different locales.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I apologize since I don't have the written copy of your comments. I did get an email, but it looks like the attachment, something went wrong with that. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of humoring me a little bit with some information that probably you've already provided. Usually, if somebody comes to a meeting like this, especially someone like yourself, and you drove all the way down here, there's some kind of important thing that you're either really trying to achieve or really afraid might happen. Would you help me understand what that is? So like, let's imagine we left this word require in there. What's the bad thing that you're hoping to avoid?
Sure. So following the term require, there's some specific bullet points in policy 2.1. And for instance, and I'll just use the second bullet point as an example, where it says incorporate alley access with garages, access from alleyways for small lots with narrow street frontage. So that would then be required moving forward. And I'm not sure our association felt that that was something that may not be appropriate for in a comprehensive plan, but perhaps that would be in development code instead. That would be one example.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And then if you wouldn't mind just humoring me a little bit further, imagine that that language was inappropriate and let's say you're correct, but it's left in there anyway. Why do you care, or why does your organization care? What's the detrimental effect to you guys?
Sure. So as our members are all realtors, and they work a lot with whether it may be selling property that is already developed or helping to sell land and get it developed, working in that process as well. So anything that's going on with real estate and how it is being developed is important to our members.
Okay, so your fear would be that it would make it hard for people to buy or sell property.
That might be a stretch to say that. I think it was more that we were just concerned of having a requirement in the plan versus another document within the city where it might be, in our minds, more appropriate.
So could I just ask for,
Sure.
help me wrap my head around it? So if it's in the comprehension plan and it says environmental protection is sustained by requiring. You just don't like that it's in the comprehensive plan itself, but if it meant, wouldn't it mean the same thing if we put it in an action item that these are required? Would it have the same impact?
I'm not absolutely sure on that. I think in discussing it with our Government Affairs Committee for the Willamette Association of Realtors, their concern was just to put something that is so specific as a requirement in a comprehensive plan that isn't updated as frequently if there could be an issue with it, that perhaps something like that would be better in a development code, that if there was found to have an issue, for instance, with alleyways, garage access from alleyways, that if there were an issue with that later, to have that updated, it would probably be easier to address and take care of through the development code versus the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Appreciate your time
Thank you.
and appreciate seeing everyone in person.
Okay. Hearing no requests for continuance or holding the record open, the public hearing is now closed. At this time, do commissioners have any additional questions of staff? No, or no?
Councillor Kazi has her hand raised.
Oh, sorry.
It's quite all right. I have a couple of comments. I think the change that was suggested is entirely appropriate. I might suggest that we include stated as by including the following elements as appropriate. Because as it seemed to me, you could be putting in a large development that was nowhere near any transit. So why would you require a transit stop? It just seemed that some of this could not be applicable. A couple of Scribner's error on line 49, the word as should be included between such and trails. And on page 3, line 3, policy 2.4, the heading is repeated.
Which one did you just say?
2.4. I'm sorry, 3.4.
Okay,
Oh, 2.4.
2.4.
Policy 2.4, see it's repeated.
Oh, okay.
So can I interpret that first one as a question to staff?
Sure.
I'm not having any opposition to removing the word requiring and putting a different word in there, but I think one of the intents here, and we've dabbled in this in each of these chapters as we've looked at them, is how much of the action items do we incorporate and try to roll up into the policies? And this was one where the Planning Commission felt like they didn't want to lose these action items and wanted to give some direction to future planning commissions and future city councils and whoever that might be, that these were the things that were identified in the housing needs analysis. And several of these were things that the commission felt were important that we wanted to give examples. And so I understand that it wouldn't be appropriate to say future developments in Philomath are required to have these things. We wouldn't want that type of language in the comprehensive plan. But the language here in policy 2.1 is develop clear and objective standards, which is state requirement, for all types of developments that incorporate principles of good urban design, livability, environmental protection, and sustainability. Well, how do you do that? And then it's by requiring the following elements. So, if we need to lighten that at the end a little bit, I think is good, or wouldn't be inappropriate. but I wouldn't stray too far away from trying to provide the list of things that would be beneficial for the city to work towards incorporating into our design standards. So this isn't where we're listing out those design standards or those clear and objective standards. We're just giving examples of clear and objective design standards that this planning commission at this time is interested in incorporated into our development code at some point in the future. But if we, again, I think to be responsive here, if you were to change that, by incorporating elements such as when appropriate, or, we can tweak that language however the planning commission wants, but I wouldn't recommend removing the bullet points or not including those, because I think that we had a lot of discussion about each of those elements that we want those included. In fact, some of the discussion was more specific than this, and we kind of summarized it into these few bullet points, and so I hate to reduce it anymore.
So I guess when I understood it when she was speaking was that the bullet points wouldn't be removed. The word requiring would be removed. So it would just, isn't that true? You weren't talking about removing the bullet points. Yeah. So they would still be there, but we're concerned with, by removing requiring, if we soften it too much, that these won't even be valid anymore.
Right. And I think when you get to deliberation, I think as the planning commission, you decide how you want to massage that. I was just responding to the question kind of about
Okay.
how that should be tweaked, or if it should be tweaked or not. And my opinion would be that it can be tweaked.
I think we're ready to move on to deliberations. And if we want to do this smoothly, maybe we could just start with a motion to accept this, and then we could amend and deliberate and eventually vote.
Nick, I think we want to officially close the hearing.
He did.
Before-
Oh, I did.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry. I was probably coffee.
Yeah.
There is a motion on page 2 of the agenda item summary, the page before the staff report.
On page 2 of what? Of this?
Well, it's right before the staff report.
I'll make a motion that the planning commission adopt the findings presented in the staff report dated 5/11/2022, PC 22-03, to amend the comprehensive plan and recommend an amending ordinance be considered and approved by the city council.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Second.
Oh, that was the old one.
Okay. Deliberations. I think since we're kind of on a roll on that one section, are we okay to work on that little piece and then open it in general to the entire document? Commissioner Yoder.
I have I can either I'm going to make a motion. I can either speak to the motion or say why I'm going to make this motion now. I can make a motion, if somebody seconds, and I can speak to it, or I can just speak to it now, right?
Yep. Either way.
Okay. At our meeting on April 5th, where we were talking about, the last time we talked about this document, this chapter, we were told, because some of the people weren't here, we were told to send in recommendations to the city manager. To verify that I heard it right, I went online, and I don't believe there's minutes nor a video of the April 5th meeting. Do you think that's true?
That is, there is no video. We had a technical malfunction that
Right.
night.
Yeah.
Chris is,
I completed the minutes today for this meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
Yeah.
So I did send something in the next day, which would be April 6th, and got a response that it was, they didn't make it in because the edits have already been sent to DLCD, and that it would be my addition that I would like to have us talk about would be in this packet, but it's not in this packet. So I'm not sure what happened there. So now I have to read to you what you should have received a while ago. So I am going to make a motion to add as a bullet point on 2.1 under, keeping it, the livability and the safety for the neighborhoods, wording that I got from another.
What line is that?
I'm line 43, making a bullet point on line 43.
Okay.
Okay, to read, new automobile connections must be accompanied by specific traffic calming interventions to mitigate the possibility of increased traffic on previous residential streets or some residential streets. This is just, that's the motion. There are.
Second the motion.
Thank you.
I'm also really, it gives me great joy to see you making a motion, Peggy.
Well, keeping you happy is really important to me. There are just some cities that are really interested in keeping the citizens that are already live here, to kind of lessen some of the impacts of some of these large developments that do impact them. And so it would put another stipulation as to if it's going to affect neighborhoods that are established neighborhoods, that it would just be right there in the bullet points, and whether or not we change the word requiring to when feasible, or that we can be discussed. But that's the motion that I made, and that was seconded. So I guess we have to, that would be an amendment to the motion.
Peggy, can you read that again, just so I can hear the language again?
Well, it's unfortunate that you didn't get it.
Slowly.
Okay, slowly, okay. Maybe Chris will send it to, people, but new automobile connections must be accompanied by specific traffic calming interventions to mitigate the possibility of increased traffic on some residential streets. This language actually comes from it's a city in New York, and it's put out there by the Community for Environmental Defense Services. So that's where I got it.
The word automobile connection seems like a weird way to describe what is a street, right?
Yeah. Because sometimes streets get open when they weren't open. I think North 11th Street is kind of undergoing that right now, or 12th, where people are really affected by new developments. Mm-hmm. And I believe the interest is to keep the traffic, to see some of the cut through traffic, mm-hmm. and to keep the traffic on the roads that have already had the traffic impact analysis done and such, instead of just the cut through. So that's the basic reason. That's why I'm interested in it.
Mm-hmm. I was just questioning the wording, not the.
Sure.
I understand the concept. When I heard the term automobile connections, I was like, what's that? Sounds a lot like a street.
New roads.
Yes.
Yeah. But I wanted to take it directly as another town. Queensbury has that in their comprehensive plan.
Well, I mean, that's an auto connection is a new street. Otherwise, they're saying if you add on to a street or add a street that goes into another one, then this would be included as far as.
But it could also be a new driveway that serves a 300 unit apartment complex.
Yeah, yeah.
Probably why they stayed away from street.
Oh, okay, I like that. That's an interesting point.
I guess I don't know that I'm in favor of this in the sense that you mentioned 12th Street.
Yeah, to
That one day will go clear through to West Hills Road. And anybody that thinks that ain't gonna happen doesn't know what's going on and, or will go on. And if you put this in there, whatever happens to the north, this is saying you're gonna have to do something to use our street, essentially. And it's not their street.
is it
That's what I read.
Is it any different than some of the other bullets? You know, protect or improve the greatest extent possible the physical characteristics of the site and such. Is it any difference of just being more aware of?
Well, you did say must be included.
It could be open to discussion.
Ben, can you explain again? I didn't quite follow what you
Well,
mean by it
it-
won't be their street.
Well, 12th Street doesn't belong to the people that live on it. Well, maybe technically it does right now, but if it becomes a city street, it won't be their street anymore. I mean, I don't know if that's happened or not, but I mean, right now it's in a district, or
Okay.
was. And if that goes into a city street, it won't belong to just them. It will belong to the city, and it can be used by anybody that's driving down that street. And if there's development beyond where it is right now, which maybe someday there will be, I mean, that's, I don't know where it says it, but it used to say that it, North 12th, it should go clear through to West Hills Road. Well, if it goes through, if the way I'm reading it is saying that you have to do something to protect us on our street, that because you're gonna have more traffic on it.
Mhm.
So, and right now, it's like I say, maybe that's not a good example because it may not be a city street right now. But if it were, it would be the city.
Assume it was.
Does that mean it's privately owned at this time?
Well, that's how people, that's what I read is, that's what I'm reading into that, is that people think that street in front of their house is theirs, not whoever happens to use it.
That may not be an accurate reading.
Well, it may not be, but that's how I read it. But that's why I said that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm okay with the language if it had something in it like consider rather than require,
Or must.
or must. If it's require and must, I mean, if we have a halfway developed arterial and then we develop the rest of the arterial, we don't want to, put something in the middle of the arterial that prevents it from functioning well, right? Just because somebody happens to live on the first half when it gets built.
How would it prevent it from functioning well?
Well, an arterial is a road that is, for the purpose of moving traffic through an area. And, say 13th between Applegate and Chapel, let's pretend that didn't exist and somebody put in half of it with the intent in putting in the other half in 5 years. And then 5 years later, you put in the other half, but you put in a little traffic circle or something so that big trucks couldn't drive through there, and so, there are times when you want to develop a street so that it's used, as opposed to every new street is developed to make it difficult to use. I mean, that's kind of the way I read it or listen to it, I guess. Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what you were saying. That's the same concern I have. I think we all want quiet streets, and we don't want the quiet streets getting less quiet. And if we just tinkered with the language a little bit. We could protect or improve to the greatest extent possible the low traffic nature of residential streets, or even just tweak those
Yeah.
two words you were talking
Right, right. So Commissioner Yoder, would you consider making some minor modifications to your wording to make it a little more soft?
Sure, yeah. I think to get the feeling of what this sentence is meaning, it's not to stop an arterial road, like stop 13th Street. It's to protect the local streets from developments when it opens up a cut through.
Yeah.
That's really what I believe that what this is about. I know that's how I feel about it. It's not to stop traffic moving. We all want to be able to get to Safeway as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. But it might be, it's just to stop cut through traffic and just to protect the established neighborhoods that are already there. I think most people, I don't believe I own my street, but I know it's a local street. That's what it's about. So yeah, we could remove, I kind of like what Joseph had said, maybe between you and Gary and Joseph, but Chris also had his hand up. I don't know if he still got.
No, we
Okay.
moved past it.
Can you read it one more time?
The old one?
Yeah.
Sure.
Whatever, your version.
Okay. New automobile connections must be accompanied by specific traffic calming interventions to mitigate the possibility of increased traffic on some residential streets.
What if we change that to say new automobile connections should consider traffic calming measures to mitigate the impact of additional traffic on residential streets?
New automobile connections should consider traffic calming interventions to mitigate the possibility of increased traffic on some residential.
Just get rid of the word possibility, just to mitigate increased traffic on residential streets.
Okay. Can I read it again?
Yeah.
New automobile connections should consider traffic calming interventions to mitigate increased traffic on some residential streets.
I get rid of the word some, just
Exactly.
residential streets.
Weird.
Okay. I mean,
Well,
That's
that's
true.
fine, but that just seems like escape. It's like which ones?
yeah, not that one.
You
They
could
were talking
argue,
about this
oh,
one.
I wasn't developing those, I was developing this one.
Yeah. They can be little sneaksters, huh?
From
Okay.
a legal standpoint, I would also request that should be turned to will.
Will be considered.
Yeah.
Will, okay, because
Yeah.
should is a little too soft, isn't it?
It's ambiguous.
Yeah, it is.
So at this point, you can either rescind your motion and make a new one with that language, or you can move to amend your own motion. I think it might be easier to rescind your motion and then make a new one with that language.
Okay,
Before you do that, which I'm probably fine with that, but I was gonna ask Chris a question. When it refers to residential streets, is that good enough? Or do you think
Should say
certain
local
ones?
Should say local streets is what we refer to them as in the code.
so it could be residential or local streets?
Well, I was just saying that's what the city calls them, so maybe that would be more appropriate.
So, oh, sorry, if it becomes a connector street though, does that change the personality of it? And, or can we expect it to stay a residential street if it becomes a connector street?
Yeah, so you've got three primary classifications for streets. There's arterials, collectors, and local streets. Arterials, there's major and minor. For collectors, there's major and minor. For locals, it's a local street. Local street doesn't necessarily mean that it's residential, but typically they tend to be your residential streets.
Would it work if we get rid of the word street and just say residential zones, and then it'll kind of cover whatever kind of street it is?
Yeah, I think so. I was gonna wait, but looking at the bullet points, I think formatting the phrasing to match the other bullet points would be appropriate. But while the
Yeah.
motion's on the table, I didn't want to speak to that. But
Yeah.
if you want to rescind the motion, then maybe we could talk about how to format the bullet point to kind of be in line with the others and to do what it is I believe we're trying to do.
Okay, then I rescind my motion.
And you were the second? No,
Joseph.
Joseph was the second. Joseph, are you okay with rescinding?
Yes, I am.
So I'm looking at the bullet points and
Did we lose Commissioner Green?
maybe. Commissioner Green, are you still with us? Did you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. We just lost your video. Just make sure you haven't dropped off completely. You don't have to have your video on. We just want to make sure you were still there.
I can tell she's there.
Okay. So I just jotted down, giving you a massage is still. The others kind of start with, provide for, protect or improve, provide green building. So if that was the same, then it would be to, protect local streets by requiring traffic calming elements as appropriate or where needed or where called for. Because at this point, we're just talking about we want to develop clear and objective standards. And this would be one of those clear objective standards is, if this is the traffic situation and this is the location situation, this is the standard. So we can't do it on a case by case. We're going to have to develop those clear and objective standards. And we have those today, right? But maybe it's relooking at those current standards that we have in place based on, when is a traffic study required? Right, and then if a traffic study is required, at what level do we require traffic calming elements to be installed, right? We have that in the code today, but what I'm hearing is maybe those standards aren't sufficient. We need to look at them more closely. So that would spell that out and point us in that direction. Again, I'm not overly concerned about the wording at this point because we're just giving some future guidance, and the real conversation needs to happen when we actually look at the development code.
Yeah. As far as the wording of this whole section, I was thinking that if we replace the word requiring with including or considering or something like that, then we would be able to get rid of the include, incorporate, provide verbs, just so that it would become a simpler list. I think that would make it easier to read.
So then it would be, then just start with the traffic calming elements, right? So we'd want to
Right.
traffic calming elements to protect local streets from adverse levels of increased traffic.
I think you'd still want to include the new automobile connections in there, just to kind of be clear.
So it'd be like, protect established neighborhoods by requiring? I thought we don't really like that word though.
Will be considered. You did say.
But by considering?
Will
the problem
be
is-
considered.
What about the fifth bullet point on line 39? How would you eliminate those verbs?
I would say protection or improvement to the greatest extent possible to physical characteristics.
Oh, the English language.
Yeah, it's very flexible.
Oh, it's so great. Okay.
So like, protect established neighborhoods by requiring new automobile connections to provide traffic calming interventions to mitigate increased traffic on residential streets.
I would say protection of.
Chris's was a lot simpler.
Oh, I think in the end, mine's simpler, but I can defer to everyone else if they don't like it.
I've got a lot of chicken scratches on my page right now.
Gary, how do you feel about traffic calming elements to protect local streets when new automobile connections are made?
I think that's excellent. I still like the word residential zones in there because some local streets in the middle of an industrial park, I don't know.
Local streets and residential zones?
Local streets in residential zones.
Okay.
That's probably gets right to what we're talking about.
Okay, who has it in one nice, concise little sentence?
Workman.
Mr. Berkman, can you?
The motion, but I'll speak to it and somebody can so move. So we're gonna add a bullet point on line 43 that states traffic calming elements to protect local streets in residential zones when new automobile connections are made.
Would you like to move that we incorporate that? Peggy?
Yeah, I move that we incorporate that on line 43.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. Is there any discussion or can we just go to a vote? I'm feeling consensus. All in favor? Raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Are any opposed? There are none. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the wording of that kind of assumed that we would be making another motion regarding the phrasing in line 31. Does anyone have a specific motion they'd like to make regarding what word they might want to replace requiring with? Commissioner Bernardini.
I think the second one about the alleys is problematic because that is the only one that I think is very specific to a housing. Let me back up. I want to keep requiring. I like requiring. I feel like I think adding that following elements where appropriate, I think is, Ruth said something so that it's obvious that not every building has to have an alley garage. It's obvious only when that is appropriate to the building type. But I am concerned that if we eliminate requiring, I feel like we are taking all of the teeth out of everything. My concern is that this document is already vague and mushy to the point of uselessness. And I get that it's the comprehensive plan and we don't want to have any specifics and that the policy stuff will come later. That said, I also believe that this is where we need to take a stand about the kind of city that we are trying to develop over the next 20 years. And these are some issues that we felt strongly about, that this, I feel like that wording is there for a reason, because these are things that we want to require. Because if you don't require them, and if you merely suggest that people protect and improve the physical characteristics of a site, they'll be like, well, we'd love to, but unfortunately it's going to cost some money too, so let's just bulldoze everything. I would like, frankly, I think we need more requiring. I think not less, but that's I get that.
Okay, Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, Gianna, I got to say that was kind of a moving speech, and I appreciate it. I kind of agree with you there. So good job. I will say, however, that I think what we're doing here is we're kind of stipulating rules for ourselves, right? So we're going to be helping write a bunch of code in the future, and we're setting down ground rules for how we're going to do that. And what I would like to see from this body and from whoever else considers it would be for us to consider all of these elements. So I guess what I'm proposing, it's a question. How would you feel about changing the word, instead of removing the word requiring, we just inserted the words consideration of. So line 31 would read sustainability by requiring consideration of the following elements. So effectively what it would mean is in a few months, when we come back, we're writing code, it would require us to consider all of these things before we make any code changes.
As opposed to requiring the city of Philomath to develop incentives for use of high efficiency alternative materials without really working that out to the nitty gritty. Because I think most of the bullets are problematic if we leave the word require in without softening it, because it's our policy to consider these things, and we're required to follow our policy, but we're not required to develop any specific language unless that word require is there. So I think it is problematic without putting in a whole bunch of extra words in every bullet. As much as I understand your passion about it and don't entirely disagree with you, I just think it's too much of a handcuff in a comprehensive plan, at least the way everything else is worded.
It's a handcuff to make the city better. It's a handcuff that's saying we'll do things that will make things better, not like, we should make it better if we should think about making stuff better. I don't know. I'm just.
No, I agree with you actually, John. So I know what you're saying, you know.
I'm fairly sure I'm going to lose this fight, but this is a hill that I'm prepared to die on because this drives me nuts. That I think there's overall, I'll tell you, okay, bear with me for 1 second. The protect or improve to the greatest extent possible, go to the end, the natural features and vegetation. And I admit that I'm feeling a little touchy about that right now because as I'm driving by the new Letman development on Philomath Boulevard, and I'm seeing that frontage opening out into the freeway. And that is, when we were talking last time about the features of Philomath that we liked and the qualities we wanted to preserve, and one of the things I talked about was the fact that Philomath is this town surrounded by more rural areas. And my concern that our development is going to start to, and we're going to end up developing straight into Corvallis, and there will be no division between that town and that all of our open spaces will be encroached upon. And when I drive by that now, where they've taken out all of that, and it's not some dramatic stand of oak trees. It's like scrubby ash swale kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, it's got charm, and it's what is on the whole rest of that stretch. Well, that's gone now. Gonna be gone forever. Mm-hmm. Gone. And now we're gonna get a really good view of our RV storage. Well, and it's killing me these days because I keep looking at that and I'm like, we were like, yes, please, by all means, that's what we want in our town. And I hate it. And
that's not true.
I know not everybody.
Right, yeah.
But that is what we as a city decided, was that this is how we want our town to look. And we get to live with this forever. This was a decision that we made. I'm sorry, I know I'm going on a thing, but when I saw that one bullet point, that was what I thought of. That we did not say that you have to maintain the natural features and the vegetation. We were like, I just feel like we lay down in the face of development, partly because of Oregon law and partly out of a lack of spine.
Increasing the tax base, I think is what the term is.
Sorry.
Okay, can I?
Yeah, I meant.
Well, no, I mean, I'll give you an example, and I appreciate where you're coming from. When I was mayor back in the 90s there, when Maybeck Hill was proposed, I was leaving office, and so because I took 2 years off. And actually I fought against the development on Maybeck Hill. We lost, but And it actually used this exact term to the greatest extent possible. Well, like what you was describing, yes, they pretty much cut down all the trees. And so, I appreciate where you're coming from, but this place, the comprehensive plan, isn't where you get into the detail of what the developer can and can't do. This doesn't say anything to the developer. They don't even look at this.
No.
Or I doubt it anyway, probably some of them might. They don't look at this.
Sure.
So what we do as Joseph was talking about, is when we go back to the development code, that's where the rubber meets the road, so
Sure.
to speak. So how it says it here, I'm fine with taking requiring out and consider, because this first line, develop clear and objective standards, that's what we would be doing in the zoning document, the development document.
So, but as we go through the document that is more of the nuts and bolts,
Right.
we look back on we look at our comprehensive
Sure.
plan.
Yeah.
And we say, when we're all gone, somebody else is,
Yeah,
5 years from
true,
now,
True.
oh, well, it says that these are required. We should pay a lot of attention to that because it's required. It's not just, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't. It's in the comprehensive plan, it says that it's requiring the following elements. So it just puts a little bit more emphasis on following those, to me, by the comprehensive plan stating something so
But it's,
matter of fact.
I guess it's not requiring the developer to do anything. That's what I'm trying to explain.
Right.
And maybe you are following that. And it's just, I guess it is, by saying requiring it, it is requiring the staff and the,
Well, that's a good question,
Planning
is who is this
Commission.
directed to? Who is being required of here?
well, that's true. It is
It's-
the staff and the planning commission and the city council.
Mhm.
So,
That's the policy of the city, which would be the council and staff and the planning commission. So the policy is to develop clear and objective standards, right? That's not going to be the developer, that's going to be the property owner, it's going to be for us. So
Right.
if I say to,
It's saying that we need to develop policies to ensure that these things happen.
As
I
a
think-
planning.
Yeah, my opinion would be, and we probably should get a motion on the table, but my opinion would be either lighten it by saying by requiring the following elements where appropriate, adding where appropriate, or do what Councilor or Commissioner Sullivan said, which was by requiring consideration of the following elements. Right, so we can require the Planning Commission, City Council to consider these elements. Or we're gonna require that these elements be included where appropriate. One of those two, but I think we do need to lighten this one way or the other. And I think either way is fine at this point. It's gonna lead the Planning Commission down the road of looking at our development code and making improvements. So I think either one of those changes would suffice. Excuse me. Councilor Causey has her hand raised.
Oh.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Causey.
You gotta wave.
just talk.
Yeah, just talk.
Well, I feel like there's been a bit of a digression, but a good
I know, I'm sorry.
digression, because I like the same things you like when you drive into town and there's a ash swale or whatever it is, there's a wooded area. And I think if you want to protect that, you have to incorporate into the code something that will protect it, that will require that Highway 2034 for 20, 30 feet will not, that no natural areas will be disturbed. You have to, and I don't even know if that's possible between ODOT and whatever, but if that's what you want to save, then do something to save it. The reason the lemon development went through is because it was permitted by the code. That's why it went through.
We just updated our landscaping code. I believe it is a 30-foot setback at this point. It might be 40. I was double checking, but we did just add that language in there to allow for that. In fact, the revision, the modification to the Mill Pond Crossing development has that 30-foot setback from Chapel. So phase 1 and 2, there is no 30-foot setback. Phase 4, 3, and 4 is going to have that 30-foot setback requirement there. So that got added. It's going to move back. He's going to have a lot more of a landscape buffer between Chapel and that development than what the other phases would have. So we've already seen some of these things that we don't like in the code, and you've already been very proactive and made changes to that code. You as in the city, right? You've taken it on, you worked with Pat, made the revisions, city council approved it, and that's in our code now. So
Well, I
the code will
mean, there's
continue
also
to
a
improve.
difference though between a buffer wall with some shrubs in front of it versus the natural
It's a
landscape as it
30-foot,
is. I mean,
it's a 30-foot landscaped area is the requirement.
exactly. But it's gonna be a landscaped area, which again, I'll take, we'll take what we can get. But I'm saying there's a difference between between not destroying what's already there and destroying it and then planting some shrubs, which is, to my mind, not.
And this is
Not
the
a-
planner coming out of me, so it's gonna sound very callous, maybe. But if you intend for it to be natural area, then it needs to be zoned as a natural area. It needs to be a park. It needs to be owned by somebody who's gonna preserve it as a park. If it's zoned industrial,
Yeah.
it's gonna be developed as industrial. If it's zoned for residential, inside the urban growth boundary,
Mhm.
eventually it's going to be residential.
Mhm.
And no matter how much you like the field or the forest, if it's inside the urban growth boundary and it's zoned for residential or commercial or industrial, that's what it's gonna be. And your fields and your forests and your all that area is gonna be outside of the urban growth boundary, because the state of Oregon for planning says, here's your urban growth boundary, you have to develop inside this circle. That's where the people are.
Mhm.
Natural resources are outside of that area. Now, inside this natural area, we can put parks and natural spaces and preservations, but they have to be called out and they have to be in the plan. And if they're not, it's residential or commercial or industrial,
Mhm.
right? And so, I mean, I hate to see a good field go by the wayside as much, but unless I'm willing to buy it and, put a preservation easement on it of some sort, the landowner has the legal right to develop their property.
Mhm.
And our code is written not to preclude people from developing property, but to develop it in a way that is, okay, it's not the natural area, but we're at least gonna put a 30-foot buffer landscape strip there,
Mhm.
right? And so we do the best we can, but I don't think we can go with the expectation that undeveloped land is gonna stay undeveloped, and that's just not reasonable. That's not the way that Oregon land use planning is set up. We have to develop within the urban growth boundary.
Mhm.
Commissioner Green.
Yeah, I mean, Chris already touched on it. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear in the fact that if I wanted to subdivide my lot and sell it to a builder, and the only way the builder's gonna buy said lot is if I take down, some 30-foot trees, I have the right to do that as a property owner. Like, that's how our city runs, right? So I know it's not what we want, but that's my understanding of where our laws are. If it's my land and I want to sell it off, I can cut down some trees to get a builder to come in.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
So based on what you're saying, in order for the city to protect that corridor along Highway 20, the city would have to buy the setback.
Buy the setback, buy the property, or request the current owners to put some type of a preservation easement on it of some sort. But anything more than that, and even then, you have to be careful, that's not considered a taking, right? I mean, if you're taking somebody's ability to develop their property, then we better be ready to compensate them. And that can get expensive pretty quick, so.
But if we're requiring a 30-foot setback that will then have to be landscaped,
Mhm.
could that 30 feet not be required to just be left rather than landscaped, be left as the natural frontage?
We've got specific language into what's considered landscaping, so as long as what was there met that if it was blackberries or some type of, not, you know, so maybe, it depends on what was there. If it's poison oak and blackberries and willows, then probably not. Those are considered not acceptable landscaping. But if what's there was some small willows and a couple oak trees spread in there and wildflowers, then that may qualify, right? I don't know.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, I realize this is probably a bit of a digression, but I kind of want to tag on to what Gianna just asked, and maybe Chris has an answer for this. When I remember the places that I really enjoyed as a kid, it was never the landscaped areas, right? They were boring. Like, it's just grass and maybe a couple of decorative trees. The places that I remember that I really enjoyed that left me with great memories were just kind of the places nobody cared about, where there were some random scraggly things growing up, and blackberries, you could kind of climb trees and tunnel in blackberries, nobody cared. And I get that in a city, we want a lot of things to be kind of ordered, but there's got to be some room for things that are just kind of unordered natural areas. And the question, I guess, is at what point or where in the code or where in the comprehensive plan would we get a chance to tinker with the language of what it means to be landscaped? Because there should be some category of landscaping in our city that literally just means pick up the garbage, make sure it's not looking nasty, and then just let things grow there.
Yeah.
So to kind of answer that question, it's really going to depend on the type of land use zone that we're dealing with, because there's different requirements for residential versus industrial. Things have to be clear and objective. And if we're like, make sure it looks nice, that's not clear or objective. So that's kind of this, what we're running up against, because when we were dealing with the landscaping portion of the code previously, it was, okay, well, it was too squishy to be clear and objective. So we're like, for X amount of frontage, you have to have X amount of trees or small bushes or whatever. So that's kind of what we were dealing with. If you're like, just leave it in a natural area, well, if they, you know, had to bulldoze it to development, or there's to trailer tire tracks, you know, or something like that, they're, you know, in a sense you could say, well, I don't have to do it because I don't have to do it. So I think that's kind of what we're just balancing two different things. And I think going back to saying, okay, well, if there are other ways to get around that with easements and the like, but in terms of making it a planning element or requirement, like a condition for that, you have to consider, okay, if I get an application, how can I approve that? Like, what standards am I approving this to? Or if you're applying for an application, it's like, what does this even mean? And that's kind of where we've got to balance the two.
Yeah, I understand all that. I'm just asking where, like at what point? Is that when we deal with the code for specific zones?
Yeah, I think it's when we're considering any of these, right? So that's one of the bullet points there. It's the last bullet point currently there on line 41 is considered green building standards, incentives for high use of energy efficient. Nope, sorry, what about that? I'll tell you the last one. Protect or prove the risks of physical characteristics of the site relating to soils, slopes, erosion, drainage, natural features, and vegetation. So we're requiring ourselves to look at that. And yeah, when we develop that section of the code, that'll be the balance, right? Is at what point are you prohibiting development? At what point are you protecting existing elements? And it's a balance.
So, may I speak?
Commissioner Yoder, yes.
On the second to last that Chris just read, protect or improve to the greatest extent possible. Could we keep line 31 requiring, but when it comes to the alley access, incorporate alley access with garages and put some word in there to the greatest extent possible? It wouldn't be quite as rough as requiring when there's no wiggle room out of it, which sounds horrible once I said it. But we would be keeping in line 31 requiring, but in 34 when it comes to garages and access, garages and alleyways, that we add the words, much as we did on line 39, to the greatest extent possible.
So I think it's going to be helpful also to put a motion on the table so that we can kind of direct the flow of the conversations going forward. So Commissioner Yoder, if you want to make a motion and see if anyone will bite. that might be the best way to start progressing forward with tackling this language.
Okay. Okay, I make a motion that on line 34, incorporate alley access with garages access from alleyways for small lots with narrow street frontage whenever possible, or to the greatest extent possible.
I'm not hearing a second.
Oh, I just start talking, don't I? Can I suggest, and maybe this will help be able to get us together on the same page.
So just really quickly, if you're going to second it or if you're going to let the
No, I
motion
didn't.
die. Okay,
No, he said it died.
Yeah, there was no second.
okay.
Okay, at least that's how I took that. Well, I'll just say this and then I'll make the motion. But to get towards what Peggy was just talking about, and in a sense what John has been talking about, is how about line 31 saying sustainability by requiring the following elements to the greatest extent possible,
Yeah.
and take out to the greatest extent possible on line 39,
Yeah,
and I'll make a motion to that.
a second.
Any discussion? I'll go ahead and jump in there. I have a problem with that in that the greatest extent possible doesn't always make sense. You know, if you're talking about connections between neighborhoods, open spaces, and schools, there might be two schools close together and a connection between the schools or to an open space, you know, goes through a piece of property that just nobody likes it, or you know, it's kind of the clear and objective standard. I think that to the greatest extent possible is always going to run into trouble for a group like us to deliberate in the future, because you can always try harder, right? Or do something that makes less sense, and then you've accomplished, you know, what's required. So I just don't I don't like the handcuff in the comprehensive plan. To me, the comprehensive plan is setting the agenda for the deep discussion that's going to follow regarding every single line item in the comprehensive plan. So that's just my 2 bits. Mr. Workman.
Yeah, I think that the policy is develop clear and objective standards. And the rest of that sentence is just how you're going to do that, right? If you want to require yourselves to do it, if you want to consider, or if you want to develop clear and objective standards to the greatest extent possible, if you want to develop clear and objective standards where appropriate, I think anything that you put at the end of that sentence isn't going to make a lot of difference, because at the end of the day, the policy is develop clear and objective standards. So again, I'm fine with the motion. I think it works fine. If you want to change that and go with where appropriate or something else, that's fine. But to the greatest extent possible is problematic in the code language. I would not include that type of language in the code, but I think in the policy for guidance to this body moving forward, okay.
Yeah. And I think, Gianna, my point is that no matter what we put in the comprehensive plan, it can never have teeth. So I think that, you know, the teeth that you're looking for are just going to come later.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. I'm a
As long
little grumpy today, I'm sorry.
As long as the words are there in some form so that they're not forgotten, you know, that we consider them later when we're doing the real language, the enforceable language.
Was there a second to Commissioner Hunsicker's motion that I missed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bernadine seconded it. Okay.
Any more discussion on the motion? All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed? Nay?
Nay.
So it looks like 2 against. We'll let Ruth do the math on how many that was for. So the motion passes.
And Haley, you voted for, correct?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like 5-2 to me.
And then Chair Connor, did we want another motion on the table about removing the first word,
Well-
those bullets, or did you have it okay on there?
Now that the word requiring is still in there, I think it works fine the way it is.
Okay.
And I think the bullet that we added probably works fine too. I don't want to wordsmith this too hard.
Okay.
Are there any other comments, questions, or discussion or motions regarding any of the remaining or that piece of text in this chapter?
Did you just ask specifically about what we had just talked about, or are you saying, opening up to other questions in the chapter?
I'm opening it, everything, but I think Commissioner Sullivan beat you with a hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just, okay, so I move that we amend the language on line 31 to insert the words consideration of. So that it reads sustainability by requiring consideration of the following elements.
That already has to the greatest extent possible at the end of it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it.
Second.
Any more? Maybe we don't need any more discussion on that. We've been around that horn. So all in favor of the motion to add the word, words consideration of after requiring? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
And then opposed? Were there any? I didn't see anybody vote. I didn't see everybody vote yes, but I didn't see any no.
I was writing.
I'm confused. I don't know. Either way, sure.
Can I get everybody to hand vote that for me again?
Not good enough for Ruth.
Let's hold hands up till Ruth's able to count
Because
everybody.
I have to look around Chris to see
Yeah.
Oh.
Darlene.
So this is adding the word consideration of. This is voting yes.
So I have 6 yeses.
And Haley, did you vote yes previously?
Oh,
Yeah.
7 yeses.
7 yeses. There we go.
7 yeses. That passed unanimously. Well, mostly I'm glad that Gianna didn't die on any hills today.
This meeting's not over.
Oh, okay. She's still ready. All right. Well, it's still my goal for you not to die in this meeting. Commissioner Yoder, you were going to say something before Commissioner Sullivan got in.
Sure. On page 3, line 6. It seemed like we'd already talked about this, but maybe not, that we had that minimize development barriers, that we had that removed. Or so it would say provide clear and objective standards, period.
That's correct. Apologize. I missed
Okay,
that. Let's go ahead and have the motion in a second though, since it's in this format already.
okay. I move that we change the wording on line 6 on policy 2.4 to state provide clear and objective standards,
Period.
period.
Deleting that minimize development barriers.
Yes.
I'll second that.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye,
I
and hold them up until Ruth says she's done.
Yes, I'm good.
Thank you.
If we want to touch on Counselor Causey's suggestions, Scrivener stuff, that might be a good idea since we're on policy 2.4 right now.
Okay, I didn't catch what you first said.
Since we're near policy 2.4, it might be a good idea to touch on Commissioner Counselor Causey's suggested Scrivener error.
Need a motion to remove policy 2.4 on line 3.
Yeah.
so moved.
I will second. All in favor? Aye.
Well, did we get adding in the word as in the line before as well, while we're doing these things?
We'll just do it one at a time.
Do them on-
That was unanimous.
Did you raise your hand?
Controversial as.
I have
Is that-
another
are you making
question.
that motion?
Well, can we get a motion on the as, just so we can be formal about it?
I can't believe we,
What as?
yeah, let's add,
On page,
let's add an as.
line 49 on page 2. We need that as between such and trails. So it reads such as trails.
Didn't we previously do a thing where we did all of these grammatical things in one motion?
You can, but there's only these two.
Yeah, all right.
What if I have some?
But the motion had already been seconded, so, it gets complicated if you want to be formal about it.
If you got a bunch of them, go ahead. Just include that with yours.
Well, I don't even know where it's at. But did somebody make that, so that motion was made?
No, we need one.
I don't even know where it is. I'd make the motion.
Page 2,
Include,
line 49, very bottom.
Oh,
Between
such
and trails.
as.
So it says such as trails.
Okay, I'll make a motion as stated by Chris.
I'll second. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 That was unanimous. Okay, Commissioner Yoder.
On page 3 of 4, policy 3.1 and policy 3.3, they seem to be kind of redundant. They seem like they could easily be added together. Maybe we didn't talk about it. Maybe I just thought it sounded like the same thing. If nobody else has looked at that and thought, wow, that could be combined, then I'll know it's not that big of a deal. Support the development of income restricted housing for households and such. And then it talks about, includes households that is with an income of 60% or less of the MFI. And then 3.3 talks about reducing the cost of housing and such. So they just kind of say the same things, but if nobody else feels that way, if they see a distinct separation, then
I see a separation between low cost versus income restricted.
okay, I'm good.
Well, I think the other 3.1 and 3.2 talk about development of low-cost housing, and policy 3 talks about well, maybe that's similar. Yeah.
Are we ready for something else?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. On page 1, and I did have a few things, but I'm only going to mention one because it doesn't quite seem clear to me. On line 33, and I might be just reading it wrong, but it says the household reported median value of a house. Am I reading that wrong? That it doesn't seem like household should be in there? That it should read the reported median value of a house and flow of it? I mean,
Oh, I see what you mean.
I don't
To
know.
me, it says as reported by the household as opposed to as reported by some agency or search of the data.
Oh, is that what that means?
That's what I read it to mean. I don't know if that's what it actually means.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure what it means, but
Chris could clarify. We might need a hyphen and that might clarify that.
I mean, I guess you're right, Gary, that that's kind of what it says, but is that something that's real, like household reported value?
I think you're right. I don't think households should.
Yeah,
I think you're right
strike
too.
household.
I think household should be struck, put down.
Or maybe even the reported, I mean, we're really are talking about the median value of a house in Philomath, whether the household reported it or not, right?
I don't think the households record the median value of the home.
So I'll make a
I
motion.
know that.
I'll make a motion for line 3, page 1, to remove in the sentence, the household reported median value of a house, to remove household reported.
I'll second that.
Well, I think you can read report.
Oh, well, who's reporting it? Chris, or, I don't know.
With this being the context, I think we can just say the median value of the house was in 2014-18. You go look at the appendix to see where that came from, right?
Oh, maybe that's where that was from, but I wouldn't think they would have said that either. But
Yeah, I like your change. It makes it easier to read regardless of what it meant.
Is there a second to that?
Do you like it
motion?
enough to second it?
There was a second. Right?
By you?
Yeah,
Gino.
sorry, me.
Fiona.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brinkley.
So I think we can just vote. All in favor? Aye.
I,
And Gianna, did you vote? Yes?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. Thank you. That was unanimous then. Any other motions, or is it time to vote on the approval of the chapter as amended? Commissioner Bernardini.
Unfortunately, Van directed my attention back to line 30. which,
on page, okay.
Sorry, page 1.
No.
That sentence on line 30, housing prices increased faster than income since 2000 in Philomath, consistent with trends across the state. I dislike that part, consistent with trends across the state, because according to that chart in our appendix, while everywhere housing prices increased faster than incomes, Philomath's rate was not consistent with others. It was worse. And I think that's significant. And that phrase, consistent with trends across the state, seeks to minimize the severity of the problem in Philomath, which is greater than in other communities across the state. This is a problem statewide, but Philomath, when you look at that list, is way out. We're at the top. It's us and Monroe. And to me, I feel like we need to show that this is a serious problem here that we are going to take seriously. And I feel like, just like I say, that feels somehow minimizing to me, like, oh, it's bad here, but it's the same as it is everywhere. My point being, I think we need to lean into that a little bit and say, we have a problem in Philomath, which is that our housing prices have increased more than our incomes.
How'd you like to modify that? More than trends with the state, or more than state trends, or greater than straight trends, or just strike consistent with?
You could just strike that last section, but
Exceeding trends across the state,
oh, nice. Yes,
What did you say? I'm sorry.
exceeding trends across the state.
something like that would make me happier. For sure.
Was that a motion?
I just crossed it out and wrote worse.
Before you make that a motion, would it, in that sentence, would it be better to say, start out, since 2000, housing prices increased faster than incomes in Philomath, rather than inserting since 2000 halfway through the sentence?
Yes.
So do your exceeding in that together.
Since 2000, housing prices in Philomath have increased faster than incomes to a greater extent than,
But isn't it,
No.
it says, I'm assuming we got this from Echo Northwest, right? This whole sentence probably.
no.
I
And,
think that whole part came from Echo Northwest.
pardon me?
I think that whole part came from Echo Northwest.
Right.
Did it?
I looked it up, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it's consistent with the trends. It's like you said, it's bad everywhere. Philomath is faster. So in Philomath, it is worse in Philomath.
Mhm.
That's why Ruth had suggested using the word exceeding. So it could read, since 2000, Philomath prices in
Philomath housing
Philomath
prices
have increased faster than incomes. No,
exceeding trends across the state.
no, yeah, that,
Exceeding those of
Similar-
other-
Exceeding similar trends across the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do like starting with the date. I think it flows much better.
So since 2000, housing prices in Philomath increased faster than incomes, comma, exceeding similar trends across the state.
Yeah.
Might be a comma splice, but I think it reads
Let's-
clear.
I make a motion to do what he just said.
I'll second that.
Can you, before we vote on that, can it be restated, please?
Since 2000, housing prices in Philomath increased faster than incomes, comma, exceeding similar trends across the state.
Okay. All in favor of that motion, raise your hand and say aye.
I,
I see unanimous, yes. Thank you. Should have a countdown. Any more thoughts, motions? Which order?
I have a thought. Line 27, page 3. I'll talk about it first before I say anything, right? I'm just gonna get people's feel on it. Echo Northwest, the information that was put out states that, because there's so much development going on in Philomath, we are getting more homes built, we are getting more apartments built, we have 80% apartment complexes to fit the needs of the 80% MFI, right? Medium family incomes. So by, say, example, line 27 on page 3, housing, providing density bonuses or other incentives to encourage higher densities. When are we going to address that we've reached with what Echo Northwest said we needed to do? We have now reached that amount of home, the extra of 300 homes that they said that we needed to build, or whatever it was. When will we address that has been met? So if we keep something like bonuses or other incentives to encourage higher densities, when will that end? When will we cease to encourage higher densities? Since this is in the comprehensive plan, we're going to reach that goal.
When there's no longer a housing shortage, I'm not sure we're going to reach that goal. That's my thought.
Well, if we use the information that we got from Eco Northwest, there will be an end to it. If we continue at the rate that we're going, we will. They said we needed to build 300 more homes, 300 more units for people to live in. So this is just a question. So we've made the 300.
To me, that was about matching rate of growth. It wasn't about affordability. That Eco Northwest number.
The number did pertain to the amount of homes made available through new development. They did have a number.
Yeah.
So if we put something like this in the this is just a question, by keeping something to encourage higher densities, when will we address, hey, Echo Northwest said we needed to have this many apartment complexes or whatever, and we've met it, or are we just going to keep going until just keep going and going and going? You see what I mean? Does that make sense?
Councillor Causey.
I think there are circumstances where I wouldn't want to leave it in, because I think there are circumstances where you would want to encourage density. For example, in the downtown area, if you want to build more housing in that area and limit urban sprawl, if you will, then I would think you'd want to leave it in there regardless of how many units you build. And the number of units, I think it's also a projection. Their best projection, but it's a projection, so.
But it definitely is something that
I mean,
was in their report.
yes. But I don't know that it would make sense to, if a developer came in and you said, well, according to this, we have as many houses as we need. Sorry. I don't think that's gonna fly. Maybe it would, I don't know.
I understand the point Commissioner Yoder's getting at. I think when you get to that point, we revise the policy rather than trying to put something in that. I mean, I think we're gonna see housing shortages, hopefully not 20 years into the future, but definitely by the time we're ready to come back and revise these, and we'll have a chance to look at it again. So I think the way it's written now is gonna be good policy, at least the next 10 plus years. But it's definitely something when we go to redo it, or when we revise these policies, that'd be a consideration at that time.
I guess, and I would add, maybe it was Gianna that mentioned it, about the low income folks. I mean, I guess in my mind, presumably, those folks, at least at this moment, generally speaking, aren't being addressed, and likely that would be higher density, housing, that if we was able to get that going would be, so to speak, for them, and that we wouldn't want to leave it out for that reason also, I guess is my point.
Are there any other motions? Well, then I think we can vote on the original motion to accept this chapter of housing policy of the comprehensive plan as amended.
As amended.
All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And I think that was unanimous. Thank you very much. Because the Planning Commission's recommendation is not a decision, it cannot be appealed. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be considered by the City Council in a subsequently noticed public hearing on June 27th, 2022. Our next meeting is scheduled for, what was that? Our next meeting is scheduled for June 20th at 6 p.m. which will be a public hearing on the Comprehensive Plan Chapter 2 economy policies. We already did that though, right?
Not the public hearing.
Okay. My memory's unreliable. How did we end up getting to Chapter 3 public hearing before Chapter 2?
We did housing first, and then housing seemed to be more pressing, so we did housing first, and then.
Okay. Sorry for my confusion there. So our next meeting is June 20th with a public hearing on Chapter 2 economy policies. And then the last item is revised meeting schedule. There's something we need to discuss about that?
We just discussed it last meeting.
I think we discussed it last time. Maybe I was supposed to include it in the packet and didn't. Did I email it out, the revised one?
No.
Okay, that's a good note for me. I will email you out the revised one. It's what we talked about.
We have it all.
It's what we talked about at the last meeting. Other than we didn't cover the area-wide plan stuff tonight. And that's just pending city council review and direction.
That was a super exciting document.
Yeah, I emailed it out. Hopefully everybody had a chance to look at it. If not, take some time. It's kind of fun.
It was super cool.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's some neat ideas in there.
Nothing else from me. We'll have a staff report at the next meeting.
How's Patrick?
Okay.
Better. He's been in the office a little bit last week,
Oh, good.
so.
Okay.
It's looking good.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
Thanks,
Have a good
everyone.
night, guys.
Good night.
Oh, it's